There, as ever, a warm welcome to the programme here on a Thursday evening. I'll introduce our two guests in a moment, but first of all, right at the top of the show, it's a very sad time for all at Sheffield Live TV, and certainly including all on this programme. Phil Baldwin was a huge part of what we did here on a Thursday evening. The regular producer of these shows, certainly during the 4 years that I've had the pleasure of presenting them and had the pleasure of knowing Phil. Well, you may have heard that very sadly, very tragically and suddenly, Phil Baldwin died last weekend. We pay respect to him on this programme this evening. There'll be a further tribute towards the end of the show, and James Gregg, I'm sure, will have words to say when he joins me for his part of it. But in the meantime, thoughts are with Phil's family, his friends and his colleagues here on the station at this very, very sad time. Let me just say to you that more than being a brilliant operator, behind the camera that you're looking at me now, just in the control room behind where you're looking at me from, besides being a technical wizard there, Phil was heart and soul involved in this show. Very kind guy, very generous, humorous, kind, and you know, we all felt his presence here even though you couldn't see him on this side of the camera. So it's a very sad time. Great guy. We'll pay further tribute later, but Phil, this show is for you, mate, and I think it probably goes without saying the kind of fella that you were to us here, that you'd want the show to go on, which it does this evening with my guests, one of whom needs very little introduction. You'd have seen him here before. Keith Hackett, Sheffield's former international football referee, former boss of England's match officials, and now an opinionated commentator on the game. I think opinionated, to say the very least, Keith. And he's got a book out, another book out. This is the You Are the Ref, the iconic long-running comic strip. You Are the Ref that you write in tandem with the celebrated sports artist Paul Trevelyan. We'll talk a bit more about that, but the guy, with no disrespect, that you maybe won't recognise and know, comes from, or is one of the organisers of, what we discovered tonight to be, I think, the largest, certainly the largest junior Sunday football league of its kind in Europe, possibly the world. He is Steve Clayton, Vice Chairman, it's a bit of a mouthful, of the Sheffield and District Junior Sunday Football League. But within those words, the numbers are quite staggering. Over 1,000 teams and something over 13,000 players. Steve, welcome to the show. There's going to be a lot of interest, and a lot of players, parents of players, will be tuning in tonight. And as you're alongside Keith, I think we're both interested in these initiatives you've been running for a few years now. This football's got a problem, hasn't it, in terms of recruiting and retaining referees, but you've taken quite a positive lead. How do you do that? You're trying to educate on respect for officials.
I think you have to go back to when perhaps sporting parents were seen to be at their worst. Where we've all heard about the parents at the side of the pitch shouting the odds at the referee, the other players, etc. So the league recognised this and realised they were losing referees, they were losing players, and the vast majority of players, parents, managers, referees don't want any of that. So they started to put some initiatives in place, following some of the initiatives from the Football Association, the County Football Association, and from that point forward, slowly but surely, things started to get a little bit better. So it's about trying to get the message out that actually let them play football, let them go out there, developing, like Johan Cruyff would have said, lose some games, win some games, but learn from it all, and in a respectful way. Now, some people take that on board better than others. The vast majority of the people we have out there, and bear in mind we have over 13,000 players, around about the 1,075 teams in the league. We believe we're at least the biggest league in Europe, if not in the world. And let's not get carried away that the vast majority of games in a weekend, in our league alone, there are over 500 games a weekend take place. If you add to that the Sheffield and Hallamshire Girls League add to it all the academies that are going on, the under-18s league. There are probably over 700 or 800 games a weekend, and the vast majority of those go on without any hitch or whatever.
Looking at my Twitter feed tonight in response to you coming on, there's still a bit of a problem in cases, because I've had some messages which I'll refer to later. But Keith, having been involved in refereeing for a century and more, it's a cultural thing we're talking about here. You grew up in an era where I'm a referee, I'll expect some measure of abuse and I'll ride with it. We're in a society now that doesn't accept that anymore, that anybody should be subjected to it.
I think I think the big difference, Alan, when I first started refereeing, and it's those informative years, we didn't have the same amount of coverage of television at the elite level. Neither did we have spectators. We probably had 2 secretaries who put their heart and soul into running the club, collecting the fees and doing everything. And now we see crowds sometimes round 3/4 of the pitch.
Yeah.
Because it's quite remarkable on a Sunday morning how many parents come, and husband and wife, boyfriends, girlfriends,
but that should be healthy.
Well, sometimes it's not, because they generate arguments that sometimes are nothing to do with the game. The stimulation is between the two opposing parents who suddenly start arguing with each other.
And you're saying in your day there were hardly any spectators?
Hardly any spectators.
Just it's for the players' benefit, yourself?
We just got on with it. Now, the other side of the coin...
Did you have as many problems with players abusing you as they seem to do now?
I can only remember on one occasion having dismissed a player on a Saturday. That evening, I decided to have fish and chips, and I was in the fish and chip shop. And
you got battered?
Could have done, but in reality, one of the players was there with a couple of mates standing outside. But the guy in the thing started going off. You know, you refereed that match, you've had an awful game, da 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 da. So all I did was add it to the report. Now, the great thing at that time was the county FA took absolute umbrage at any referee being abused. And so the fines were heavy, they were called into personal hearings, all that went off. And as a result, I think the actions that they took ensured there wasn't an escalation of the problems. But the other side of it is, in a modern game, is I naturally, having had years watching Premier League and Championship and others, I know the problems there. We know that players crowding referees is still a regular scenario. We've talked regularly about grappling, and we've also talked about simulation. Sadly, kids watch these games, parents watch these games. Sunday morning, the young referee who's come to referee a football match is now expected to referee like the Premier League referee and like Michael Oliver.
Yeah, and it's also fashionable for a young player to be having a go at a referee because that's what he sees or surrounding him. So you're involved in an education process, and I like the fact that every so often I get emails, emails and tweets, which kind of show a table you're looking to benefit or pat on the back teams that show most respect to... did he get any points for that, or is it just...
No, it's better than that. We have a massive trophy presentation, as you can imagine, with the size of the league, once a year. At the moment that we're holding that over in Barnsley at the Metrodome, in the banqueting suite. It's a fabulous evening, it's really professionally done. It's lovely to be there. And what's really nice is there's a respect evening. So all the teams that win the respect awards, and sometimes these are outside bodies that actually recognise our players that send awards along. And we have a full evening, and the trophies for the respect evenings are bigger and better than they are for winning the league.
Are they?
Oh, they're absolutely fantastic.
And is there a correlation between the teams that do well in terms of results and show respect, or do you find the opposite is true, that the teams who are doing badly show more respect?
It's a mix. It's definitely a mix, because sometimes the most competitive teams with not the best attitude still win, but we have had a bit of a recently some teams that are winning respect towards and the league, and that's fantastic to see.
There seems to be sometimes a bit of a stigma about fair play, and it's a bit like the old school SWAT thing. You know, the pupil who's never in trouble with teachers, always gets his homework on time, isn't usually the most popular, is he?
No.
And is there a bit of that? I don't know.
No, I think back to what I was saying when you went over to Keith, is let's be realistic. The vast majority of people and players want this.
Yeah.
We remember the ones that actually don't care about respect. We remember the ones that haven't got the referee. And what they forget is a lot of the referees that come through our league, and we've got over 650 of them at the moment, is that a lot of those are actually minors themselves. They're all under 18.
Yeah.
And we are very good at bringing through young referees. So if a parent or a manager is abusing them, actually there's a safeguarding issue there. So we feel as a league it's our duty to try and educate everybody out there and use initiatives. So when we see initiatives like the FA asking for leagues to trial the sin bin for dissent, we snatched the hand off.
Yeah.
And last year we saw a reduction by 44% of cautions for dissent.
For cautions, based on the sin bin.
Yeah.
Your age range is under 7 to under 16, all the way through. And I know
Under 17
Keith,
now.
Under 17 now, is
yeah.
it? I know you're a supporter of the sin bin idea, Keith.
I am a supporter of the sin bin idea. I'm a massive supporter of this league because I wonder where we would be if we didn't have a league that does care about refereeing, which they do, and then does help young referees in their informative years. You know, they passed the exam for the laws of the game. Now they've got to put them into practice, and that is always a difficult period. And I like, you know, I think they do a wonderful job in this part of the world, bringing referees through, and you know, showing the pathway to the top.
Well, let's go to the top just briefly. We'll sort of switch this conversation backwards and forwards. There's Keith's book here, You Are the Ref. What's 300 footballing conundrums for you to solve. And no sooner do you solve 300 than another 300 come along because there's always something happening that you can't legislate for. And just before we come to one of these bizarre events, you and I were watching, we get some Leeds United supporters, believe it or not, watching this show. And well as the referee did in the game that you and I watched last weekend at Bramall Lane.
He had a really good game.
Sheffield United won whole nil, and he punished grappling, didn't he?
Absolutely.
For a penalty.
Yeah.
There was another referee or refereeing team at Elland Road, Leeds Brentford 1-1. And I've been shown the video, as you have tonight, of a headbutt by a Brentford player on a Leeds player off the field. And it's clear as day that he should have either been sent off or the FA should have moved in.
When you showed it me, I could understand why the match officials have missed the incident. And you know what the FA have got to do is to make certain the game is played in a fair and equitable manner. And they are the holders of the law, and they have the licence of the referee in order that he carries out his duties in accordance with the laws of the game. So here's an incident where a player has deliberately headbutted an opponent. Now we're talking about two substitutes. So I can understand why it's
not
been missed.
seen. Yes.
But then in a review procedure, they've thrown it out. Now I've got to tell you that is an absolute idiotic decision that damages the image of the game and sends out exactly the wrong message to youngsters watching that and to spectators who have seen it, because it degrades the standing of the referee, because everybody blames the referee. They don't blame the player.
No, they should be blaming the FA, as you say that.
You know, sometimes I wonder, because I suddenly say, look, I know that they have a panel, and I know that panel's made up of referees or former referees and former players, and I just say, switch on, guys, because this is an act of brutality that has no part to play in our game.
On the field, in the game, spotted by the referee, it's a straight red, and that's it, isn't it? On you go.
Absolutely.
Talk about the image of the game. We'll come, I think probably we'll save this for part 2 to simulation, and Sean Dyche's brilliant unilateral stand,
Absolutely.
but it's unilateral against diving, as a Premier League manager speaking out. But there's so many amusing scenarios here, and there might be scope for you in your next book, on a recent incident which I happened to see on social media, where a guy's taken a penalty. I think this was sort of a lower league game, maybe a junior league game, but the footage is incredible, where a guy's coming in to take a penalty. He hits it's going well wide of goal, hits the referee on the head and bounces into the net. And the goal is awarded. Correct.
Absolutely. I mean, look, let's discount the argument about encroachment, because very few referees now seem to punish that.
No.
So there's that argument, let's park that. In reality, you're part of the game. And I smile and then put my head down, because I can remember many years ago refereeing Freshville against Stocksbridge Works in the County Senior League. Gordon Walker, who went on to play for Grimsby, took a shot on goal. He was missing by a mile. Right. Sadly, it hit me, bounced straight back to him. Goalkeeper's committed, everybody's committed to make the save. Just pops it in that. Right. They looked at me and I've gone like red-faced and embarrassed. And at the end of the game, I tell you, I disappeared very quickly from the ground.
And you had to give the goal, of course.
Well, absolutely.
You had no choice.
I was just thinking at the weekend, I had exactly the same. I was refereeing an under-11s academy game, and straight away a young player with the ball comes running in, runs straight into me, because it's very difficult to miss me, of course, at the size I am. Runs into me, the ball goes straight to the opposition. He's heading towards the goal, he buries it in the back of the net. And luckily, the manager just reminded me when he was offside ref. I went, yes, he was.
Get out.
So, phew.
But these things do happen.
Amazing, isn't it?
You know, people write to us and you go, no, it can't happen, but then you know that it does.
But the difficult thing for us lay people is, what we're going to, if we are the ref, you say you're the, what are we going to give in that? And of course, you've got a split second. I pore over some of these and I think I should know this.
Yes.
But you give the answers, which is fascinating.
Yeah, and sometimes I have to study them, because you know, there's been the laws of the game tend to change every year, minor changes. Sometimes they go for clarification, and in fact, put it in fog. Yeah. And as a result, you suddenly then have to go back to previous laws of the game to get clarification on the answer.
So what you realise is that when they put a new law in, you read it and you remember it. What you don't always remember is what's been taken out.
Correct.
So you assume it's still in.
Absolutely.
So you can still be refereeing to a law of the game that didn't exactly exist. Like the shoulder charge, for example.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
No.
So,
no.
You know, it's
more's a pity, really, because I didn't see it. You watched. I mean, it can be a pleasure, can be a pain. You watch your son refereeing, don't you?
I do,
in the league. And what's that like? What's an experience? And have you encountered what we're talking about earlier?
Yeah, I've had 2 of the worst 90 minutes of my life, I think, almost. Not a bit exaggeration, but watching him referee. I'd love to watch him referee. In fact, Keith and I stood and watched him referee when your grandson was playing recently. Yeah. He's a good referee. And he's a young lad, he's 21 years old, but his first ever senior game, they were absolutely horrible to him. And of course, as a dad, you stand there and you just ignore it, because if it was someone else's lad, I'd get involved and say, I'm sorry, you can't do that to him. Yeah. But as your own lad, he's got to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, in my view.
He doesn't want you getting involved on his part.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
It demeans him.
No, absolutely. Too right. But the second one, they were absolutely abusive. It ended up at the county FA at a tribunal. They sent off several players. Even at the end, they came to try and take his red cards off him and his notebook as he's writing his notes. It was absolutely a horrible game. Totally, everything we're talking about, no respect whatsoever in that game.
Which game was this ago?
What
level was this?
It was county senior game. It's a few years ago. It was Wickersley versus Davy United.
Yeah. But of course, with the kids, that shouldn't happen to that extent. Although they can be a bit nippy when they get to 15.
I've refereed a few that do get to that stage. I mean, you mentioned how we get to respect marks. the awards, or do you want to come back to that?
I think so. We've got 14 seconds.
Oh,
We can't
right,
do it
yeah,
in
no worries.
14 seconds before the break.
Can't quite do that.
No,
no.
And then we only have a 5-minute interval here as opposed to 15.
Yeah.
So in 5 minutes, do rejoin us. James will be here as well with these guys, Keith, and we'll see you in 5. See you.